our benchmark is always we're trying to double our money on each property. We're just finding properties off market, pieces of land, and we're buying them for less than full retail value. And then we're reselling them on the market, sometimes after some value add. Could be some brush clearing, could be getting a survey done, could be getting a perk test done, could be getting a lot split done. Any of these types of things are considered value adds.
Welcome to your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Jim Pfeiffer, and today our guest is Pete Reese. Pete is the president of Realvest Properties, a land development and investment company. Pete has successfully purchased and sold hundreds of pieces of real estate for a profit over the years for himself and on behalf of his clients. And now he focuses on land flipping. In this episode, we talk about how and why he got into land flipping, how he is able to sell properties he acquires for twice what he pays, why he loves the lower priced, difficult to sell properties, my favorite, how to be a passive investor in land flipping. And we talk about his free course that shows active investors how to be successful land flippers. Pete Reese, welcome to the show. Let's start out with who you are and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, Jim, I appreciate you having me on, first of all. Yeah, my name is Pete, obviously, and I do land flipping. That's my primary business. And by land flipping, I mean we buy and sell raw pieces of land, generally without seeing them in person. And most of the time, it's a pretty short-term hold if things are going right. We have a whole system where we market for properties off market. And then we sometimes do some minor value add on these properties and then resell them on the market. So I sort of just stumbled into it and never considered myself any sort of land expert by any means. I got into real estate like a lot of people did. Back in the early 2000s, I saw all these shows on TV about people flipping homes. And I thought, hey, I can do that. So we started doing, myself and my wife, we started doing that ourselves. And, did some of the renovations myself, very questionable quality. Then started hiring some of those things out and started turning that kind of into a real business. Got my real estate broker license here in California. And then the market crashed and we realized that flipping homes wasn't the best business to be in at that time. But I did have my broker's license and I just decided to kind of pivot a little bit and it became completely focused on being an REO broker for the banks and went through a whole season of life doing that. And I'm glad that didn't last too long because that was a little bit of a crazy time. But I did learn a lot, got a lot of great connections through that and worked with a lot of investors, wasn't doing a lot of investing in myself at that time. Got sidetracked into another business with my wife for a number of years. And that was kind of our whole focus. And that was a great, fun business. But then I just had that itch to get back into real estate investing again. And this was in 2021. And at the time, I just kind of stumbled into some people talking about this land flipping stuff online. And I would see anecdotes of, hey, I bought this property for $10,000 and I sold it for $30,000 2 weeks later, that kind of stuff. And it got me really intrigued. And I thought, well, I can do that. I like buying and selling. I feel like I'm good at identifying value. And I bought someone's course and it kind of got me the basics on how the business model works. And I just sort of went all in on it. So it was actually the end of 2020 when I first got wind of this land flipping. And then 2021 was the first year where we did any deals. March of 2021 is when we resold our first property, first land flip property. 2021 ended up doing about 1.2 million and some change in revenue at almost 50% gross profit margin. And then 2022 did about 3.5 million in revenue, 40-something% gross profit, I believe. And then 2023, we've already done over 6.5 million in revenue, probably hoping to end up the year around eight plus in revenue. So yeah, so we're just in the process of really scaling this up and trying to do some big things.
Wow, that's great. Now, I definitely have a lot of questions because I'm not real familiar with land flipping and all of that. But I want to step back and first I want to ask the REO brokering. Can you explain what that is? I know that was probably you were doing that mid 2010s kind of time. So can you tell us what that is and kind of what you learned from doing that?
Yeah, basically, I was exclusively just listing bank-owned properties. So they would go through the foreclosure process, I'd be signed up with all these different banks that had inventory. And as soon as they got a new foreclosure, they would send me an email and say, new property assignment. And then my first job was to go out to these properties and determine if it was occupied or not. A lot of times they were still occupied because, at the time, people were, really pushing the eviction process and kind of, trying to stay in the homes for as long as possible. So, and then at that point, I'm kind of the representative of the bank. They're viewing me as the bank, even though I'm just a real estate broker, an independent real estate broker. So, I would work with people and try to negotiate a good cash for keys deal with them, for a win-win situation. So I was pretty much just doing that for a number of years, starting at about 2008. And that was my primary focus. So just listing bank-owned properties, and would go through the process of, getting some minor stuff done, getting them trashed out, getting them, sometimes painted and paint and carpet and things like that. So I would organize all that, had to put all the utilities in my name, my company name, stuff like that for the bank, and then get those turned on. And I would just put them on the market, put them on the MLS. And at the time, they weren't looking at what was owed on the property before. They were just looking at what the property was currently worth. So I would do a broker price opinion and let them know, like, hey, here's where the market's at now, regardless of what they had into the property. And they would just evaluate it based off of what the current market value was. And we'd put it on the market, and we generally get, 15 to 20 offers, even at that time. It's because they were, cash buyers, investors at the time that were just looking to accumulate rentals. The flips weren't really happening a lot at that point because the buyer pool sort of dried up, like financing for buyers and everything, at least at the beginning of the real estate crash. So a lot of investors just kind of buy and hold type investors that were buying them up, and large companies as well. So
and then so you got out of real estate for a while, and then when you got back in, you decided to flip land instead of houses. Now I'm assuming, and we're going to get into it, that land's a lot easier to flip. I always joke, I did one house flip and we made hundreds of dollars, and that is a fail, right? When you spend 6 to 9 months on a project and you pocket a couple $100, that is not what you want to do. But why did you decide to go into land flipping rather than getting back into, say, real estate flipping or something else in the real estate area?
I was struggling with that at the time. Like I knew how to flip homes, and I'd done it before, and we were successful with it. I also know what goes into a flip, and dealing with the contractors, dealing with all the improvements, a lot of variables there, things that you don't anticipate come up, and they're always cutting into your profit margin. All those things that come up, is rarely something that comes up that improves your profit margin. It always decreases it. It always either decreases your profit margin or increases your hold time, both of which are negatives. Logistically, I just wasn't a big fan of that business just because there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of variables. So I was looking for something better. I was looking for something. I was thinking like, I don't know, just searching for something. And that's kind of how I stumbled into the land stuff. And I thought, well, on the surface, it sounded great to me just because most of these people that were posting about it, they were not doing any sort of improvements at all. Like they were just buying it and reselling it quickly, very quickly. And I thought, well, that's great. It's just like the value is like in buying it for the right price and just buying it cash and offering people, that as a solution. You're just their quick close solution, and it just made sense to me because typically, a lot of people view land as pretty illiquid. It takes a while to find the buyer and everything. And yes, that is true if you are trying to price your properties at full retail value and waiting for that right buyer to come along. We force the issue by when we put it on the market, we resell it at a less than full retail value price normally, and we do some value adds sometimes in order to make it a little bit more appealing. So we try to force the issue there to get the quick sale. So yeah, it just kind of resonated with me, and I just didn't want to get back into the home flipping thing. I was considering maybe getting into the BRRRR strategy, doing that, buy and fix up, and then refinance out, all of our cash, and then move on to the next one and accumulate properties that way. But I don't know. There was still a lot of that renovation side of things that I really didn't want to get into.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, you've obviously had success in land flipping, so let's dig into it. What is land flipping, and how does it work?
Yeah, essentially, we're just finding properties off market, pieces of land, and we're buying them for less than full retail value. And then we're reselling them on the market, sometimes after some value add. Could be some brush clearing, could be getting a survey done, could be getting a perk test done, could be getting a lot split done. Any of these types of things are considered value adds. So we don't always do value adds, but sometimes when it makes sense, we do. And we generate all of our deals. I mean, historically, we've generated all of our deals with direct mail, meaning sending out offer letters to people in the mail. So we build lists of landowners that the land matches a certain criteria, send out actual offer letters to people in the mail. And these offers are based off of average pricing for a particular area. And then people respond. Some people are happy about the offer. Some people are not happy about the offer. Some people, just don't respond at all. But I mean, most people don't respond at all. But some people are motivated and hit them at the right time. And we work out a deal with them and, buy the property off market, generally with our own cash, put it on the market, resell it as quickly as possible. So our average hold time this year has been about 100 days, factoring in all the properties we sold this year. Last year, our average hold time was 70-something days, and before that, it was 60-some days. So it's crept up a little bit, but I do think there's a couple of reasons for that as well. I mean, we're focusing on bigger properties than we were at the beginning, and bigger properties generally take a little bit longer to sell. So,
and what kind of land is this? Is this land that's going to be developed for building homes, apartments, commercial? Is it everything? How do you find these, and how do you know what you're buying?
Yeah, for the most part, we're buying rural properties, larger rural properties. We do pretty much everything. Like I buy and sell like infill lots and and properties that are, have some viability for a subdivision or something like that. But most of the properties are larger rural properties. And when I say larger, 5 to 10 acres plus, all the way up to biggest one we've done was 1,500 some acres, So we find these people they're in the assessor records. So we use a list service which compiles all this information, which allows us to sort things and everything. So I might take a particular county in a particular state and build a list of all the landowners 10 acres and above. And that's, we put together a list that way and then send out our offers. And when it comes back, we've got tools that allow us to kind of research these properties when people respond. And we see if our offer price was right on, too low, too high. When people respond, it's just a lead at that point. We're not kind of bound to whatever offer price is on there. Obviously, sometimes that offer price works for both sides. Sometimes it's a negotiation either way, when we look into the details of the property.
And then what's the next use of the property? If you're buying rural land, is this farmland? Is this just random forested vacant land? I mean, because when you buy it, you have to think, well, I got to find somebody to sell it to. So who is that person that you're selling to, and what is the use of the land? I'm sure there's different options for each. Are there different exits as well?
Yeah. Sometimes people, sometimes the properties are farmland, like you mentioned. Sometimes they're fully wooded. Sometimes they're recreational properties. We do sort of focus on properties that at least have the potential to be a home site. So a lot of people will buy a property with the intent of like, hey, I want to build a home here, or hey, I'd like to put a cabin on here, and then use it as recreational type property. So we try to ensure that we're buying properties that are at least potentially buildable. Sometimes we know during our due diligence process that it's not buildable for whatever reason, and it's simply a recreational property. And in those cases, we just make sure that it's priced accordingly and priced as a recreational type property. So we've got kind of a wide range of buyers, but I'd say the majority of the properties are people that are looking for a potential home site, and then also recreational type properties. So.
And what markets or states are these in? I mean, it seems like, I'm so familiar with like multifamily or self-storage, and there's certain markets, the Texas, the Florida and Arizona, those are the markets where there's a lot of growth. Is that the same kind of thing where you're looking for a market where the population's growing, jobs growing, or is it more targeted towards, hey, I have this great property, it's on a lake or something, someone want to build a house there? Talk a little bit about that kind of thing.
It's a combination. Obviously those areas that you mentioned and others are high growth areas, and they're easy to sell properties in those areas. They're also harder to get those properties in those areas. So it's a kind of a trade-off, easier to sell, but harder to acquire and get the good deals. But we look for markets where there's activity, where there's things buying and selling. There's an active market for land. Areas that are kind of too rural and too remote. There's not as much data. There's not as much infrastructure around as far as good agents and things to help us, teams to help us on the ground to get these things sold. So I do like areas that have a good amount of activity, and we're just making sure to buy them right. I do like the higher growth areas. They're definitely, we do a lot of business in those type of areas, but we do all over the country. So I live in California, but we buy properties all over the country, and I've rarely seen any of these properties in person. So,
and how do you, what does it mean to buy right? I mean, that's the whole thing in real estate, right? Is you make your money when you buy the property, not when you sell it. If you don't buy it right, it doesn't matter what you sell it. You're gonna have problems selling it. So what does buying land right mean?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, our benchmark is always, we're trying to double our money on each property. So like if when I say that, like for instance, I might buy a property for $50,000 and then I think I can resell it for $100,000. Now, by the time we have closing costs on both sides and other expenses and things like that, I won't really double my money on that particular deal. There are deals where I easily double our money and more. And there are other deals where I don't really come that close to doubling our money at all. But that's kind of the benchmark that I look at, where it's kind of like my criteria, like, hey, if I could buy it for 50 and I think I could sell it for 100, where I project I could sell it for 100, then I would do the deal. Now the numbers, might come in lower, or they might even be higher than that, but that gives me some wiggle room there to do good deals. So I don't buy a property for 50,000 and then think with the intent of like putting it on the market for 70,000, because even though I might make $10,000 after all closing costs and everything, it's just not enough wiggle room for error. And with land, there's so many variations between properties. The comps are not as exact and as you would find a lot of times in single family homes or something like that.
So what's the disconnect between buyers and sellers that someone can go in for land? Like I get it on a home, someone wholesaling a home where they might do a few things and then they sell it to somebody else for a different purpose or something. But you're basically taking land, and let's say you're not doing a bunch of value adds. You're just buying a piece of land and then you're just selling it, right? So what is the disconnect in the market that why can't that seller go direct to the end buyer?
Well, a lot of times they have tried. They've tried to put it on their market maybe, and they've listed it with a broker who's overpriced it, and it sat on the market for a year and it didn't sell. So we have that situation come up a lot. We are the convenience buyer, similar to if you're going to go buy a new car, you could either take your existing car and trade it in at that dealership. You're not going to get top dollar for it, but it's going to be the convenient thing to do. Or you can list it private party and try to squeeze every dollar out of it. Most people don't do that. But we are the convenience buyer. We offer a quick close. We're cash, no hassle. We don't make them do any jump through any hoops or anything like that. We're the liquidity option for them in that way. So that's kind of the trade-off. And a lot of people, they just don't want to go through that process. This is not, many of these properties were inherited. They've never seen the property, or they bought it 20 years ago and they haven't been there since. A lot of these types of things, and they're tired of paying the property taxes. They're tired of paying for any maintenance on these things. It's just not a big, someone's house or house is kind of a big thing to them. But $50,000 piece of land that they own on the other side of the country is kind of like, well, okay, yeah, they might be able to squeeze more out of it if they list it with a broker and go through this whole process, or they could just kind of move on and sell it to someone like me. The other thing is that it's not very easy to find agents that will, deal in some of these smaller value properties. And they may have tried, hey, can you, calling up some of these agents and say, hey, I've got this $70,000 piece of land to sell. I mean, there's some agents are just not going to take a listing like that. So they might have run into roadblocks like that as well.
You talked a little bit about value add. Can you expand on that just a bit and tell us what types of things do you need to do? You mentioned brush clearing. I'm sure there's other things. Do you have to, prepare it to get it, connected to the grid or anything like that? What kind of value add do you do, and what kind of value does that actually add in terms of dollars to the property?
Yeah, brush clearing is one of those that's a big go-to for us because a lot of these properties, they might be wooded. They haven't been really used, if ever, for any sort of purpose aside for just a wooded piece of land. So some of these properties, we'll send someone out there on our team as part of our due diligence process, and they're so overgrown, there's so much underbrush and everything that no one can even walk on the property. Like you need a machete or you need something in order to even get to the interior of the property. So properties like that are very crucial to get some brush clearing done, to clear some paths, potential home site maybe on the property. So buyers can envision, what it is. Like they can actually see it. They can walk the property. It's very hard to sell a property if someone's not even going to be able to walk into the interior of it. So something like that it's a minor value add thing, but it really increases the marketability of the property. We do other things like a perk test, things to make them buildable. So like that's a big thing in a lot of areas, like to get a perk test done to make sure it could support a septic system. So we'll do stuff like that. Sometimes a survey is kind of a necessary thing as well, because the legal description and everything is very, very old and was just passed down through the years. And by getting a survey itself, we could add some value to it. Sometimes we do a number of these as well. Like we might buy a larger property, say it's a 100-acre property, get a survey done, split it up into 5 properties, and then sell off those properties individually. So then we can achieve a higher price per acre on something like that as opposed to just reselling the whole big chunk to someone else. So,
and as real estate investors, one of the big advantages, as is the tax implications. But when you're dealing with just land, there's no depreciation, correct? So, is there any favorable tax treatment of this land flipping when you sell something?
Well, you're not going to get, obviously long-term buy and hold type real estate has special incentives, with the depreciation. You can do accelerated depreciation in some cases and things like that. There are some things with land that I've just recently stumbled into, but for the most part, this is a business like any other business. Say you're buying and selling cars, for instance. It's a short-term hold. There's no special tax incentives for selling cars. So that's the way I view it. It's just like you're buying inventory and you're reselling the inventory quickly. You're not holding things for a year, so you don't get long-term capital gains treatment or whatever. But it's a business like any other. Like you do it within a business. You buy a property, you resell a property, you make a profit, and you keep kind of rolling that. You've got regular business expenses that you can use to write off against those profits. And then if you're a real estate professional, you could do other tactics like buying long-term hold properties that help you use that depreciation to offset any earnings in your business. But it could be any bit. You could be a restaurant. It could be anything like that generates profit. It's just I think people get hung up on that question. Like, well, land flipping, you have to pay all these taxes. Well, it's like any other business. Like you make money, you pay taxes, right? So.
Right.
So it's just that you don't have the special tax treatment that some categories of real estate have. So that's the thing. But I was talking to someone actually yesterday. There are some things if you're holding some land where you can do some sort of accelerated depreciation type things based off of the soil, farmland specifically, based off of the soil values and things. So something to look into. Yeah.
And what's the situation with you're paying all cash for these deals? So is there no debt involved, no banks? And where do you get the cash? Do you use private investors to help you, or you just have the cash, you buy a property and you go rinse and repeat?
Yeah, so for the most part, up until kind of this year, I've been doing everything with my own cash, just buying and selling properties and everything. But, it's always a matter of like your inventory and how many, your projected closings and all these kinds of things. So I started, I have a podcast of my own, and it started getting approached by people like private lenders and things that wanted to kind of participate. So I did start doing that this year for some of the larger properties where, I've got private lenders that will basically lend money on each deal individually, and then they get paid off. So we pay them, like 12%, and they get a couple points as well. And it's it's kind of a win-win, because these are deeply discounted properties at normally 50% of market value or something like that. So yeah, I've been starting to do that this year. So the other thing is I've got a program where I actually fund other investors' deals as well. So it's basically a situation where like an investor will bring me a deal, and then I fund it myself. And then when the property resells, we split the profits 50-50. So there are those types of arrangements in this business as well, if you don't have the cash to put up to buy these properties.
So that's a way for maybe a passive investor to get involved. I'm a full-time passive investor, and I don't want to be in the weeds, literally buying and selling properties. So this, I do that with a couple of guys where I lend them, just like you said, I lend them the money and they go do the investing. So is that the best way to do it as a passive investor, is to be kind of the lending money to a land flipper?
Yeah, that would be a really good way for a passive investor to be able to get a kind of outsized interest rate return, and really don't have to do any of the other stuff that goes along with it, which is extensive. I make it sound easy, but there's a lot of parts to the process and everything.
And so you said you have a course where you educate others on how to do this. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about the course, what kind of person might be attracted to this? And obviously, I think it's more of an active business. It's probably on the passive side of active businesses, but it's still an active business. So you kind of talk about your course and who would benefit from it?
Yeah, so I've got a community which is called Land Conquest, and it's just landconquest.com. And right now we've got over a couple thousand land investors in there, some brand new, some experienced investors and everything. It's part of that community. I have a training program, an extensive training program that is entirely free to any of the community members in there. So I'm not charging anything for that course, and you'd pay thousands of dollars from other, coaches and things like that. So I give that away for free to any of our community members. And yeah, so the ideal people that kind of do well with this type of business are, a lot of people come from that other, the fix and flip world or the wholesaling world or whatever. And those people seem to pick it up really quickly. And they're like, well, this is so much easier. This is so much easier than flipping homes. So, also, any other people that are, business minded, looking for something different from what they're doing. A lot of people start as a side hustle maybe, and then they're like, well, wait a second, my side hustle, in 2 months, I made more from my side hustle than I make at my W-2 job all year, Yeah, even if they don't have the money to buy the properties, I've got that program that I talk about where I fund deals. It's called partnerwithpete.com. And essentially as soon as you have a deal under contract, you just submit it on there, and I review it. If it looks like a good deal, I'd say, hey, let's fund this deal. And then my team takes over from there, and it becomes passive for that investor, because my team takes over, and we do everything from that point forward, like all of the due diligence. If we need to pay for brush clearing or any of that kind of stuff, we do all that stuff. We hire the agent to help us resell it. We do the transaction on the buy side and the resale side, and just everything that goes along with it. And then when it resells, we split the profits 50-50. I had an investor that brought me a deal a few months ago. They just brought the deal. It was a good deal, so we agreed to fund it. So we closed on the purchase. 3 weeks later, we were closed again on the resale. We had an offer like right away, cash buyer, and they ended up making $180,000 just from getting the deal under contract, and we split the profits, So
wow, well, that's fantastic, and that's a great number to end on. This has been a fascinating conversation, Pete. If listeners are interested in learning more about what you do, what's the best way they can connect with you and learn more about you and your business?
Well, definitely head over to landconquest.com. That's our community. If you're interested in kind of learning about, like what this business is really like, I do a monthly income report as well. And I've been doing that for about the past 2 years. So that's over at turningprofit.com. And that's the website for our podcast, which is also on YouTube and all the podcast platforms and stuff. So
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.